So I was talking to my friend Dale the other day, and she said something that I wasn't able to shake. You may be right, she said. You may also be divorced. I mean, just sit with that for a moment. You can win the argument and lose your marriage. You can make your point, but lose your kids. You can end up completely, provably, 100% right and end up completely alone. And when she said it, I thought, that's not just true of marriage, that's true of all of life, isn't it? But when was the last time you had a rift? Not just an argument, that happened at, dinner time and blown over by breakfast time, but that kind of rift where you see that person, but you haven't been on speaking terms for months. The cousins that don't make the funeral. When you step into a work environment, you just feel it, that kind of party, the toxic culture where people camp in different groups. The sides, that cold civility that feels more like warfare painted with a fake smile. You know what I'm saying? And those kind of experiences that we have. And if you've been in church circles enough, you'll know that there's a particular kind of rift that opens up among people who describe themselves as followers of Jesus. But something happens where you start to have the in-group and the out-group, and people start to take sides and get entrenched in their views, and often ends up in either a public split or more of a quiet, silent one when people just leave the community, never to be seen again. Family war, work war, church war, all of it just different versions of what my friend put her finger on. You can be right and lose everything that mattered to you. But what if there's something more important than being right? And what if that's being right with each other? That's what I want to dig into more today. So we're in a series called Woven, as Chris said, weaving our way through this book of James. As we've heard, James was the half-brother of Jesus, and James early on in his belief system thought his brother had lost the plot until he met the risen Jesus and ended up becoming a key leader in the early church. And he wrote a letter to his church that we know as James, found in the New Testament of our Bibles. And really, in summary, it's all about how do we weave faith into everyday life, including our relationships. And notice as we come now to chapter 4 of this letter that he wrote, James goes straight to the core question: what causes fights and quarrels among you? Straight to the point. Now remember who he's writing to. He's writing to people who describe themselves as followers of Jesus. And the fact that he's so blunt in what he writes tells you this isn't a hypothetical. There are rifts happening in this community. And so as a good pastor, he's taking some time out and says, okay, actually all of us need to take some time out. We need to talk about what's going on. Now, if you remember right at the start of the series, his people are really doing life tough. Originally, they were gathering in Jerusalem, and then a lot of persecution happened in Jerusalem, so the church spread all around the place. And this is the church that James was leading. And now they've been pushed out of their homeland, that they're living as foreigners in places that weren't all that glad to often have them. So that they're people living under pressure, under strain, that they're trying to hold it all together while just feeling completely unraveled in life. And when people are under that kind of pressure, rifts, well, they're not surprising, are they? I mean, this is our experience. When you feel squeezed, whether it's financially or relationally, when you're tired and afraid and stretched thin, you start to see these cracks, and they become these big rifts in relationships. And James sees that, and he loves this church too much to kind of leave them where they are and what they're facing. So wherever you are in your faith journey today, whether you've been following Jesus for 40 years, or whether you're just connecting first time today and just trying to explore where you are with Jesus, you qualify to hear this conversation because you too have experienced one of these rifts. Many of you will be in one of these rifts right now, and we're in those rifts because we're human. All of us know the ache of being at odds with someone. And so just to give you a bit of a preview where we're going, there's like 3 parts to this talk. We're going to look at the source. We're going to look at the source behind the source, and then we're going to look at the solution, if you prefer, what we fight about, what we really fight about, and what do we do with it. So what is it that we fight about? What's the source? So James asks the question, what causes fights and quarrels among you? And then helpfully, he answers the question himself. He says this, don't they come from your desires that battle within you? It's desires. It's something that I want. Now, just say these words quietly to yourself after me. I want something. I want something. And James says that's where the conflict actually begins. Not with the other person who we tend to blame everything on. James says it actually begins right in here with something I want. And now the wanting of good things, that's not actually wrong in itself. God made us to want lots of things, to want connection, wanting to be understood, wanting to be seen. Wanting is human, wanting is good. But there's a line, isn't there, between a desire and a demand. A desire says, I want this. A demand says, I want this, and if I don't get it, somebody's going to have to pay. So have a look at this line, and I want you to be able to say this out loud with me the way it actually feels when you're in the middle of a rift. You have full permission. You can dramatize as much as you want. You ready for it? Okay. I want something. No, you're not really doing it. Because I know what it's like when you're in a rift. And often, many of us would go quiet, but, internally, we have this narrative going on, okay? So you can go for it. I want something. I'm not getting it, and someone's going to pay. Now we feel awkward saying that, don't we? Not just because we're in a room, but, it's like, can we actually nail it like that as we actually want? But James says this is actually the core driver, like the engine behind our conflict. In fact, he takes it up an extra notch, and brace yourself, because what he says, really, really strong language. He says, you desire, but do not have, so you kill. You covet, but you cannot get what you want, so you quarrel and fight. Now, he's not saying you literally go out and murder someone. But what he's saying, I think, is when you follow that desire that's in here all the way to its ultimate destination, if you let it go that way, this is where it goes to. That left unchecked, the thing that starts with an I want, ends with this, I will destroy whoever is in my way. So see, James refuses to kind of for us to sit back and just think, it's just like a small thing. No, he connects that desire to all-out war. You want something. The people around you won't cooperate, and so war breaks out. Have you ever been on the other side of the argument and you kind of sit back and go, man, why was I just so determined to win that argument? Honestly, why couldn't I just let it go? What was so important about being right that I was actually willing to wound somebody whom I love? Anyone else kind of understand being there before? If we're honest, that's all of us, right? Well, let me kind of push one step further from kind of the want word to the need word. Because when you're right in the middle of it, it doesn't feel like a want or a preference. It actually feels like a need, doesn't it? Let's go back to that list again. I need to be heard. I need to be understood. I need to be right. I need to be seen. I need to know that I matter. And here's the thing with needs like that. When it's strong enough, it actually starts to feel like it's moving from want to actually starts to feel like this is like breathing. If I don't get these needs, I'm not able to survive. Think back to when you were a kid playing in a pool with some friends and, hands are on your shoulders and you've been dunked under the water. And initially it feels like fun until you can't get the breath that you need and you start taking in a bit of water. And there's a line, isn't there, between dunking and drowning. And when you can't get air, you don't stay calm. You panic, you claw, you're swinging because you have these instinctive needs. And when you're held under long enough, that need to be heard, the need to be right, the need to matter, that those needs lead you eventually, like breath, if you're not getting those needs met, you start to claw and swing at whoever is out there. And so this week, when you start to feel your blood rise, when you feel that conflict coming, and I'm sure all of us will have an opportunity around this week, just like take a step back and go, what is it that I actually want so badly right now that it almost feels like if I don't get it, it's like I'm not getting the breath. And so I'm about to swing in full action mode. I think just that one honest question might help us reflect on what's really going on and start to name what James says is going on right in here in our heart of hearts. But he doesn't stay at that surface level. He now plunges a bit deeper to the source behind the source, the problem behind the problem, what we're really fighting about. And to see where he's taking us, we kind of need to back up from chapter 4 and move back to the end of chapter 3. And James has these two completely different ways of doing life. He calls them two ways to live, what might be considered wisdom. And I like to think of them almost like as two different operating systems of life. He says this, if you're wise and you understand God's ways, prove it by living an honorable life, doing good works with the humility that comes from wisdom. And then he gives us one of these operating systems from which we might live. This is the world's logic, earthly wisdom, he would call it. He says, but if you're bitterly jealous and there's selfish ambition in your heart, don't cover up the truth with boasting and lying, for jealousy and selfishness are not God's kind of wisdom. Such things, he says, are earthly, unspiritual, and demonic. For wherever there is jealousy and selfish ambition, there you will find disorder and evil of every kind. In other words, I want what you have, and I'll do whatever it takes to take you out for me to be on top. I mean, he says the engine behind that kind of operating system is that life is a competition. It's this contest. There's a winner, there's a loser, and I intend to win. So your gain is my loss, so I keep score. I hold tight my corner. And of course, all that ever does is I breed this conflict, because if life is a competition, everyone around me becomes this rival. I'm out to win. But then he talks about this different operating system, this different kind of wisdom, a wisdom that's heavenly, a wisdom from above. He says, the wisdom from above is first of all pure. It's also peace-loving, gentle at all times, willing to yield to others, is full of mercy, the fruit of good deeds. It shows no favoritism, it's always sincere. Those who are peacemakers will plant seeds of peace and reap a harvest of righteousness. So what's the difference? Well, I think the person running on heaven's wisdom, they're not competitive, they're generous. They're trusting God to fill their tank, to fill up those needs, to meet them at their moment of need, so they don't have claw and grab anymore, because the breath they're receiving in life is coming from the Spirit of God. And so there's always enough for them to yield. There's enough peace to give peace. There's enough love they've received in order to give love to others, whatever is going on. So James contrasts these two operating systems this way. On the left, you've got the earthly wisdom. You've got kind of the fruit of our culture. Jealousy is impure, selfishness, boasting, lying, disorder, favoritism. And then on the right, you've got this heavenly wisdom, or the fruit of the Spirit, we could say. Mercy, pure, willing to yield, humility, sincere, peace-loving, wide welcome. And it's a lovely list, isn't it? One grasping, one generous. But here's what I want you to see. We can stop there, and there's beautiful screen. It's nicely laid out. Might seem a little bit distant. James doesn't want us to stop there. So he reaches for a word to summarize all of this, and he finds a word that's so personal, so confronting, that it stops being a diagram on a page with some contrasts, and it becomes a matter of the heart. Listen to this. You adulterous. Don't you realize that friendship with the world makes you an enemy of God? Adulterous. I mean, it's a shocking word, isn't it, to actually say to a church community about what's really going on in here. I mean, adultery is the betrayal of a marriage, right? That you're committed to one person, but you're giving yourself to someone else. So why on earth would James take that title of adultery and speak to it about a church in the middle of conflict and arguments? And I think it's because James knows his Bible, and because James knows his original readers knew the Old Testament as well. And throughout the Old Testament, God would speak about his people giving their hearts to something other than him. And when that was happening, the language God reaches for to describe what's going on, it's not a language of rule breaking, it's the language of broken marriage. So from the very first time God gave his commandments, he says things like, I rescued you, I'm yours and you're mine. Don't go giving your heart away. And that language is not like contractual language, it's more of the language of relationships, the language of marriage. And so what happened when God's people did give their hearts away to Baal and all these other gods, the gods you would run to for good crops and a growing family? Listen to how God describes it. Hear the feeling in this. Like a wife who commits adultery, Israel, my people, have worshipped other gods on every hill, under every green tree. He doesn't describe it as like idolatry or code breaking, it's adultery. The God who said, I want to be your one and only, looks at his people right in the eye and says, you've given your heart to someone else, haven't you? You've been with somebody else. Now, you might think, well, this ancient history, we don't have, idols and shrines anymore around us, generally, at least in New Zealand, at least maybe in your world. What would that have to do with an argument in a church car park or around the dining table or with the wider family? But what if an idol isn't just a statue? What if an idol is ultimately something that you look at? It might even be something good. It becomes the ultimate thing. It becomes this something that we give our heart. Rather than to God, we give our heart to that person or that thing. So for one person, it might be a career. For another, it might be the kids turning out well. For another, it might be giving your heart to that relationship or to being respected or to feeling needed or to being right. And again, those things aren't bad. They're good things. It's just when we take these good things and they become the ultimate thing, so we center our life around them, and we find our identity in them, and we have to, they become like air to us, that if we don't kind of get them and keep them, we suddenly start to fight, and we're just like trying to reach for something that we don't have. So go back, to that list from a few minutes ago, the one about our needs. That I need to be heard, I need to be understood, I need to be right, to be seen, to know I matter. These are good needs. But what happens when those needs start to become, I guess, the operating system of our life? They start to become the center that we have to have it. If we don't have it in that relationship and in that career or in that whatever it is, we start to, everything matters. And when they become like this operating system, the thing about operating systems, they're always running in the background, right? You don't boot it up every morning and choose which one it is. You just live with it. And often you don't even realize the operating system that you're living with until you come into conflict and until that thing has been taken away from you and that relationship isn't providing you all of those things that you want. And suddenly you realize what it is. And maybe you're sitting there thinking, well, I'm not even sure I believe in God. So with this talk about like idols and God, that doesn't really probably apply to me. But even if that's where you are, just set the God discussion to the side for a second. It's like James is placing his finger right on the thing in your heart. And he's saying, this is what you feel. This is why you fight. This is why there's conflict going on. Because you've given your heart to this other thing, to this other pursuit, this other identity. And if you don't have it, you're just going to do everything to fight for it. So you don't have to be a Christian to understand all of that. All of us know that ache. So James is saying most fights aren't actually what they're about. That argument that you keep having is not really about the dishes. It's not really about the roster. It's not really what he said or she said in the meeting. Underneath it, James says, is this desire, a desire to be loved. You've handed your heart that should be given to God, but you've handed it to this other person or thing or cause or outcome, something that was never meant to hold it. And with the ache of a faithful spouse, God says to you, you've been seeing somebody else, haven't you? And you feel the ache when God says that. See, friends, that's the source behind the source. It's not a bad mindset. It's this misplaced love that comes from in here. So what's the solution? What do we do with it? Maybe right now you're already starting to think of a specific person, specific argument, specific situation at work or in your wider family, and the wound, it's still there. And maybe if you're honest, you're even able to start to diagnose it and say, I think it's coming from that need, that desire I have, and maybe that's where I've like given my heart over to that other thing. And you're starting to own it. You're starting to realize, I've been depending on that thing, that outcome, that person's approval to tell me I'm okay. So now what do I do with it? Where do I go? What's the solution? Well, here's where James turns. You see, the first part of James chapter 4 ultimately is like this diagnosis of the conflict, of the problem. But then he kind of pivots to what I find are like some of the most beautiful words in this whole letter that he writes. Let's listen to this. But God gives us more grace. I mean, just sit with those words for a second. He gives us more grace. After all the like fighting, the carnage, the grasping, the spiritual adultery, God doesn't step in and go, you've failed, you've been like miserable towards me. I'm like kicking you out, go and do your own thing, fend for yourself. No, God's not like that. He knows fully what we're doing and who we've given our heart to, but God's response is he gives us more grace. He gives us more grace. And if you've never heard the heart of the Christian message simply summarized, effectively this is it. It's not a move that says you need to like clean yourself up and then maybe God might consider you taking you into his family. It's quite the opposite. That while you were still grasping, while you were still so unfaithful, still in the wrong, God gives more grace. Now, I want to remind you who James is writing to. He's not writing to outsiders who have never heard about grace. He's writing to a Christian audience who needs, again, to hear about grace in relationship to relationships and how to weave grace and faith into the common relationships we have so that we don't have this kind of conflict and fighting. That while you are still grasping as Christian people, while you're still unfaithful as Christian people, God gives us more grace. See, friends, this is the gospel. It's like level playing field for everyone, whether they're a Christian or not, because all of us come and find this desperate need. And when we turn to other people and places and things to try to meet that need, we all have to keep coming back to the gospel, to God, to say, this is where I am. I want to give you my heart. And if you're still exploring what faith is, ultimately it's about relationship with God and giving your heart over to God and finding identity in him. You see, God is wildly generous. He gives, and he gives even more. That's why Scripture says, James says, God opposes the proud, which is a person who says, I don't need grace, but shows favor to the humble, who acknowledges, oh man, I need God to show up. I need God's grace to transform even what's in here. So here's the way to access it. Get low, like 2 words. If you prefer, be humble. God stands against the proud because they're the ones always grasping, always competing, always like defending whatever they place their identity in. They're God, effectively. Grace can't come in those situations. But when somebody's humble enough to go, this is my need, and God, you're the only one that can meet that need, there's this humility, you're going low. And we need to do that every moment of every day. So after saying this, James fires off a whole round of commands. There's a lot of energy to what he writes. Just stay with me as we go through it. He says this, submit yourselves into God. Resist the devil, he will flee from you. Come near to God, he will come near to you. Wash your hands, you sinners, and purify your hearts, you double-minded. Grieve, mourn, and wail. Change your laughter to mourning and your joy to gloom. Humble yourselves before the Lord, and he will lift you up. A lot of commands. We can almost get like lost in this like to-do list, checklist, but right in the heart of it, right in the middle are these words: grieve, mourn, and wail. I think what James is calling us to do is not oops, my bad, sorry, but kind of like trying to go deeper behind that. Kind of the argument again behind the argument, and coming clean in this like real repentance to understand what's really going on in our heart of hearts. To be able to say, God, the problem wasn't that I fought. Really, the problem is that I've loved this other person or thing or object or career or need, and I'm not turning to you. And I'm sorry not just for the argument, but I'm sorry that I have turned to somebody, something other than you to find what my heart needs. There's a crushing list, isn't it, when you kind of go through what James just said. Let me just highlight a couple of things in it. First, you can't experience humility by gritting your teeth and just trying to tell yourself, be humble, be low, be low. It doesn't work that way. All that does is tend to try to find our own need in ourselves and kind of meet it. What tends to happen, we need our hearts to melt and break so much. And ultimately what I've found is that happens when you look to Jesus, the one who is worthy of all worship, all worth, all honor and respect. He needs all of that, he should have all of that. And yet Jesus chose to be low. Jesus chose to humble himself and become one of us, enter into our world. And when you see and you start to grasp the distance Jesus went through, you can allow your heart to break as well, and therefore experience what it is to be humble. Second thing I want you to see in that list, look at it again. Because it's not just what we're told to do, though there are things we're told to do. But look at the way God meets us in our moment of need. In the same passage, he gives more grace. He shows favor to the humble. You come near to him, he comes near to you. He lifts you up as you humble yourself. So yes, there's moves that we make, but as we step out to make those moves towards him, towards home, God comes running toward us because he is so delighted in where we are. And as we kind of humble ourselves, he lifts us up. And James is using language that comes from the Psalms, something his readers would fully understand, because the Psalms is full of this language. Like Psalm 40, he lifted me out of the slimy pit, out of the mud and the mire. He set my feet on a rock. He gave me a firm place to stand. I wonder if, just thinking about that metaphor, I wonder if some of you might relate to that today. That sense where you just feel like stuck. Just like in this muddy place in a relationship with your parents or with your spouse or with the wider family, friends, colleagues, whoever that might be, and it just feels, how do I get out of this? James says, get low, humble yourself, and he will lift you up. You see, grace isn't just what we receive where God allows us to be forgiven, but grace is also something that we receive to allow him to form something in our heart of hearts. Grace comes in, and then grace is able to go out into these relationships around us. Grace received, grace released. Because the person who really knows they've been carried by grace are forgiven beyond what they realized they deserved. Are lifted out of that mud where they couldn't really climb out themselves. I think it's that person that finally releases the grip on having to be right, because grace starts to affect their heart, where they just open their fist in the fire and they open it and just realize, I can give grace in this moment. I can give forgiveness in this moment because I've received it. I don't have anything I have to fight for my identity or my security or my need to be right, because I've received everything I need from my Heavenly Father. And so I'm just in a moment of generosity and giving. Grace came in, so grace is going out. See, friends, here's the big idea. When grace is enough, you don't have to win. You don't always have to be right. When grace is enough, you don't have to win. I want to come back to where we started this whole series. When we began Woven, you might remember I took some harakeke, flax, New Zealand flax, and we spoke about how a weaver takes that flax and it looks pretty unremarkable in and of itself, but in the weaver's hands, as strands are pulled and it starts to be like dunked and immersed and becomes pliable. The weaver holds that flax in his or her hand and starts to weave it, going down and going up and going down and going up, and turns something into something like a kitty, this basket that becomes beautiful and useful. But there's a tension that's healthy that can form something good. But of course, there's a tension that becomes unhealthy when we're like fighting and bickering with each other. And that won't lead to this. That will lead to those like unraveling in relationships. And I think what James is saying is there have to be times when you go under. You can't always be just like going up. You go under and you go up and you go under and you go up. That's what weaving looks like when you're under tension. And if you allow the weaver to take even the conflicts and the differences and the tensions we feel in relationships, he can do a great deal with that. But it takes humility. It takes that heavenly wisdom, that different way of living life to allow him to forge and form something very different in our communities and in our life. Grace weaves what conflict tears apart. And when the watching world starts to see a community that's able to come together, that's like so diverse, and yet the Spirit of God is able to like weave us into something beautiful, and rather than unraveling us, united and useful and beautiful, the watching world goes, that's what I want to be a part of. I want in. And ultimately it all comes back to receiving grace and releasing grace to others. So let me come back one last time to that list we had at the very beginning. That list of needs that we feel. I wonder which one might be more you. And of course, there's other ones you could throw in here. I need to be heard, to be understood, to be right, to be seen, to know I matter. Those needs, they're real. And you're not weak for having those needs. They're good. And the ache when those needs aren't met, that's not the problem. The problem is where we take those needs. If you take those needs into a relationship and ask your husband or your wife to meet that, or your friend or your colleagues or your career or your identity in the way you see yourself, or your kids or whoever it is, when you're placing effectively your heart and the need for them to meet something, you're asking them to do something that ultimately they can't fully do. And so what do when they don't deliver? Well, we go to war because we're drowning for this air that we still need. The only one that can fully meet those needs, of course, is Jesus. So think again about this picture that James is painting in this passage the whole time. That God, our Heavenly Father, is this faithful husband, is the metaphor he would be using. And he looks to people who've given their heart away, and he says to them, you've been seeing somebody else, haven't you? But rather than God just turning away from them, he looks at them and invites them to come back, to give their heart once again fully over to God. Because our faithful one took place on the cross when we were so unfaithful, and he gives us grace for this moment of need. So think about that thing you've been trying to squeeze out of everyone around you. To be truly seen, to be heard and known and safe. That's what Jesus is offering you today. He says, I see you. I hear you. I know the needs you have, and I want to meet them in this good news of the gospel. And ultimately, I'm the only one that can. And you don't have to compete for it. You don't have to try to win at all costs. But in your humility and humanity, if you would just come to me and open your clenched fist and receive my grace, it will forgive you, and it will also form you and weave you into something that can be beautiful. Grace in is what makes grace out so possible in our relationships. So for the person who knows deep down that they've seen and heard and they're safe in relationship with Jesus, that's the person that's able to stop fighting because they've got nothing that they have to prove anymore. Because when grace is enough, you don't have to win. In a moment, we're going to come and take communion. Tables at the front, the back. If you're online, you can join us too. And I love this time because it's the bread and cup, they're like such simple symbols that carry this beautiful message about grace. And as a reminder, every week when I come, I'm coming with empty hands. There's like nothing that I bring to this. And I come and receive the bread and the cup, the symbol of taking from the death and the life of Jesus. And this is what sustains me in all of life and the troubles we have and the conflict we experience. We need to receive his grace so that we can give grace to others. And maybe you're new at all of this and you're welcome to the table, because all of us come with need, and the only criteria to come is desire to receive grace, realizing you got nothing to offer. And if that's where you are today, in a moment, you can just, in the quietness of your own words, just say, God, I want in. I know the state of my heart. I know I've been placing my heart on all these other things. I want to turn to you, and I want in on this relationship. And when you receive his grace and his forgiveness, you're able to come and join us as we continue to take this bread and this cup together. Received grace, released grace. God gives more grace. He always has sufficient grace for us. Let's come and pray together. As we're coming to pray, you might even just want to take your hands and just put them in like a clenched position, first of all. Almost a symbol of how often we find ourselves in life, protecting ourselves, fighting at all costs. If you're up for it, I invite you just to open them, as hard as that might be. Their posture of open-handedness, receiving grace for this moment, so that you can also release and give grace to others. And of course, this might be the first time that you're receiving from God. The quietest of this moment is just saying, God, I realize the state of my heart, this pursuit that I've been on that's so empty. And then you might just say something like, God, I want in on this relationship with you. Thank you for the cross and the resurrection and all that allows me to come into this, that it's not earned, it's not something that I have to perform in. I give you my heart. So here we are, oh God, all of us, level playing fields. Come needy, so needy. And yet we come hungry for your grace to meet us in all of these needs that we have. To receive your love, to receive your forgiveness, to receive this new identity, to receive the fullness of your Spirit. That we would not only receive grace, but we would give and release grace to others. Would grace and faith weave into our ordinary life, ordinary relationships, where you would make something so beautiful out of us, individually and as a faith community. We look to you, we come hungry to the tables to receive from you. Thank you, Jesus. Thank you, Jesus. Amen. Amen.